Hi guys, hope everyone's well and welcome back to the Improvement Podcast. So it's been a while since I really recorded a podcast episode for yourselves, just because I've been really busy with kind of my upcoming and previous shows, since I'm kind of competing now, and I've been putting out quite a few bits of content on YouTube, so I've not really been stressing about the lack of content in terms of the podcast quite as much. So if you've not already, feel free to check out the content on YouTube. And quick update on myself since it's been quite a while. So I am currently, I think, 5 days out, 4 days out from my next show, which is on Sunday. I've competed, as I'm recording this podcast, 3 shows where I managed to win the Scottish BNBF as a novice. I came second and got an invite to the Worlds at the British finals for the BNBF, and also second and an invite to Boston Worlds with the WNBF. So yeah, been a successful season so far, to be honest, and nearly at the end of it with, I think, 10 days until my last show, which is exciting. Not excited, like, I'm enjoying the process and prep's going well. I'm loving the shows, but it'll be good to kind of be back in a gaining phase for sure. So there's obviously the enjoyable aspects of each phase. So this episode, I'm going to jump into mistakes you are making dieting when it comes to hunger management, when it comes to having good performance, and just when it comes to the success of your dieting phase. And the first one I want to jump into is liquid calories. So liquid calories are something I recommend really kind of limiting when you're in a dieting phase or in a calorie deficit. In other words, the reason being is when we think about the satiety that liquid calories bring in comparison to solid foods, it's not going to be as great. What I mean by that is, if you have, let's say, a smoothie versus having a big bowl of fruit, you're going to get more satiety from the big bowl of fruit. Like, think about it logically, what's going to take longer to digest? Like pre-blended fruit that's already kind of assimilated, already like in a liquid form, or eating like a whole apple, orange, or whatever other kind of fruit you're consuming. Same with like things like oats or whatever else you'd put in a smoothie. So making sure you're limiting liquid calories, I think, is absolutely key, and that's going to lead to greater satiety and hunger management because the food's going to digest at a slower rate, which is typically a good thing when you're dieting. And as well as that, just the process of chewing food does contribute towards feelings of satiety, and also it's a bit more enjoyable actually eating your foods, and it's probably going to fill you up a bit more, right, for that reason. So make sure when you are dieting, like, you're limiting liquid calories, and not just from things like smoothies. And the reason I say smoothies is a lot of people think, right, I'm going to start eating healthy, and the first thing they do is start having things like smoothies, whereas not that it's the worst thing ever to have, and not that there's maybe there's definitely worse things you could consume for sure, and it's not the worst option in the world, but you're probably going to get more satiety just consuming that food whole. And also things like fizzy drinks. So when you are kind of opting for having some sort of fizzy drink, just get a zero sugar option, because it's not that much sacrifice in terms of enjoyment, in terms of taste, flavour, but it's going to allow you to actually eat more of your actual food, again contributing towards more fullness. And same applies when you're having things like coffees, when you're putting things like sugar in it or any milks, or if you are going to somewhere like Starbucks, like trying to get like something with less milk, or something plain like an Americano is going to do you a lot of good in terms of your ability to manage hunger. So the goal when you're dieting, in my opinion, if you want to manage your hunger well, is consume as much of your calories possible from actual whole foods, meaning foods that you actually, or not just whole foods in terms of foods that aren't processed, but you want to chew as much of your food as possible. You don't want to consume liquid calories. So minimize or remove liquid calories as much as you possibly can when you're in a deficit, and you'll probably find you'll have better hunger management. This next point is something that you could say ties in similar, and obviously it's not quite a liquid to the same extent. You're not going to drink them, but like sauces as well. So like if you are having like a salad and you're firing like mayonnaise on it, you're firing like dressings on it, etc., then again you're not really doing yourself much good. You're shooting yourself in the foot in terms of your ability to manage hunger. So what I recommend is, like, with your sausage, try and get the most low calorie sauce possible if you're using sauces on your foods. And that can be things like some hot sauces are extremely low in calories. You can get some like chip shop style barbecue sauces that I use when I'm dieting that are pretty low in calories as well. And when you're kind of having things like ketchup or mayonnaise, get like the reduced salt and sugar ketchup, get the reduced fat mayonnaise, or just remove mayonnaise completely, to be honest, because again, the amount of calories you're going to consume from it's going to be pretty high and it's not going to fill you up much. So make it easy for yourself and try and go easy on the sauces when you are consuming them. And if you are having sauces, aim for the ones with as little calories possible with them. And then once you find kind of what sauces you enjoy that are low calories, run with it. And you can get a ton online if you want to order them, like in terms of like skinny sauces or whatever, or basically like low calorie versions of different sauces. So maybe have a look into that if you are wanting to kind of keep having some certain sauce on your meal, like if you're a lover of barbecue sauce or something, or mayonnaise, and try and at least get like a better option in terms of it. Because again, you're just making it hard for yourself if you're consuming a good chunk of your calories from mayonnaise or any other kind of sauce or condiment. And in terms of our or my next point, it's going to be like consuming non-filling foods. So again, that ties into kind of liquid calories and sauces, but like people will have things like when they're dieting, like things like cereal or granola, and although these foods aren't necessarily unhealthy, again they're not going to contribute towards satiety much in comparison to something like oats. And the reason being is foods that are higher in fiber, like oats, are going to digest at a slower rate in comparison to, like, say, cereal or granola. They're foods that I'd pretty much save for when I'm bulking and when I'm trying to purposefully eat a lot of calories and trying to get down a lot of food without getting full. There's some foods that I'd typically consume. So make sure you're trying to, again, you don't need to stay away from them in terms of they're not bad foods, but if you want to manage your hunger, then they're definitely not the best foods to eat. And you can get creative when it comes to like making things like oats and other foods by adding like more water to them. So for example, if let's say your hunger is quite low, you aren't really feeling the effects of your diet, and then you can put less water in your oats. Whereas when you are getting to the back end of a dieting phase, your hunger's higher. You can do things like put baking soda in your oats. You can put more water in them, keep microwaving them, and then that's going to make it higher in volume, or in other words, higher in size, while still having the same calorie content. So that's something that I'm kind of doing now. So I'll have like 4 times the amount of water as I do raw weight oats. What I mean by that is if I'm having like 100 grams of oats, I'll put 400 ml of boiling water in and then microwave that, so that I can have more actual food volume. Whereas when I'm dieting, I might, or when I'm gaining, for example, I might opt for something that's going to digest a bit easier and faster, like cereal, or I might just add less water to things like oats when I am in a deficit. So, or when I'm in a surplus, sorry, when I'm not trying to manage my appetite, my appetite's not as high. And also, like with your fruit consumption, again, fruit's good for you. I'm not demonizing fruit here, but you can get creative with what certain fruits you're consuming. For example, instead of having like dried fruit, which probably isn't going to contribute towards much satiety, and again, something I'd say for when I'm in a gaining phase, I'll opt for things like berries, which is probably one of the best options in terms of being really low calories. So things like strawberries, blueberries, raspberries, whatever berry you kind of enjoy, really, are going to be great options for getting kind of a lot of food volume in your diet without, again, consuming a lot of calories accordingly. So they can be good option, like swapping from things like banana, apples, oranges, and fruit juices towards things like berries and other fruits that are lower in calories. And same applies with your vegetable intake. Again, all fruits and vegetables are reasonably low in calories, so it's nothing to kind of lose sleep over. If you're consuming a banana, you're probably still going to be able to have like a successful dieting phase. I've never ran into someone who is struggling with their diet because they're consuming, or like the limiting factor for someone's diet adherence, like I don't think's ever been having a banana instead of having blueberries. But if you're wanting to absolutely maximize your ability to manage your hunger, then that's something you could consider swapping to more things like blueberries, which you can buy frozen, which can be a super convenient way to make sure you're getting enough micronutrients, or in other words, vitamins and minerals in your diet, but as well as that, be able to manage your hunger effectively. And also, so things like honey as well. Again, honey, good source of kind of carbohydrates, but it's not something I try and consume a lot of when I'm in a dieting phase. So things like honey, any sort of like jams, spreads, etc., trying to limit them as much as possible, and then you can replace things like honey with like a sugar-free syrup of some sort if you have it on certain foods, or you can just simply remove it completely, or have things like sweetener to give you a bit more kind of taste in the food you're consuming or whatever you're consuming, because again, it's not going to really contribute towards satiety much. Like when we think about, right, how hard is it going to be for our stomach to digest something like honey? Probably not that hard. It's probably just gonna, like, if you fire, let's say, 100 grams of honey on your meal, the actual volume of that meal is the same, really. It's not like you're eating a lot more actual size of food, so that's something to consider. And like I said, dried fruit. So dried fruit's something that's going to be pretty calorie dense and something I'd recommend really avoiding when you're in a deficit. And you can also look at things like when you're cooking your foods, like using things like butters, cooking oils. You can swap them for things like low calorie sprays, like the 1 calorie spray you can buy at the shops, or you can use like a non-stick pan, because again, if you're using a lot of calories just simply cooking the food alone, you're not actually eating that food, if that makes sense. But it's still gonna contribute towards your calorie content. And a lot of people don't think about this. Like they think, oh, it's just a wee dash of oil. All these wee dashes of foods add up. So if you're someone who's tracking their calories, not seeing weight loss, you feel like your food's low, are you actually being honest with yourself in terms of, are you tracking and accounting for absolutely everything you're consuming when it comes to like the cooking process, for example? And in terms of what you should be aiming for when you are in a dieting phase, and what you should be trying to do is aim to eat like a high protein intake. And the reason being is protein's got many benefits in terms of our ability to build and retain muscle, but not only that, protein digests slower than, let's say, if we're consuming carbohydrates. Like if you consume, let's say, 200 calories from steak versus 200 calories from cereal or whatever, the steak's going to take a lot longer to digest, and as a result keep you fuller for longer. And when we think about protein, it's also got a high thermic effect, which means we burn more calories digesting protein than we do other macronutrients like carbohydrates and fats. So again, having a high protein intake's not only going to allow you to build, retain muscle effectively, not only manage your hunger effectively, but lastly, it will help you burn more calories. And what I mean by that is if you're consuming 2,000 calories and they're all from carbohydrates or fats versus 2,000 calories from protein, you're not gonna actually, you're gonna use more calories breaking down that protein, and you're gonna require more calories breaking down that protein because of that thermic effect. I believe the amount of calories it takes to digest protein is round about 30% of the actual food you're consuming, if that makes sense. Whereas when it comes to things like carbohydrates and fats, it's a lot lower. I believe when it comes to the like carbohydrates and fats, it's around about 5 to 10% for carbohydrates and around like 0 to 3% for fat, which is quite substantial when you think about it in the grand scheme of things. So again, it just makes life easier for yourself, which is obviously in your best interest, because if you can make it easier, if you can make your diet lower stress, it's going to be more sustainable, and then you're going to make more progress as a result of that. And also like aiming for high fiber foods, which will include things like oats, like I touched on, and also things like fruit and vegetables for the most part as well. So trying to aim for high fiber, because again, fiber is quite hard to kind of digest. It digests slower than, let's say, foods that are lower in fiber. So making sure we're having high protein intake, high food volume. So trying to make your food you're consuming high in size but low in calories. Because what gives us the feelings of fullness isn't just the amount of calories we're consuming, but also the amount of food volume and size in our stomach. When we stretch our stomach lining temporarily, that's going to contribute towards feelings of fullness. And another mistake I see people make is health. Like they think, right, I'm trying to lose weight, I'm trying to, make a positive change, which I'm all for. I'm not trying to put people down, but they think healthy means low calories, and they think healthy foods mean a good option for fat loss, whereas it's not necessarily the case. Because as you've noticed, some of the foods that I've mentioned in this episode, they're not bad for you, like things like smoothies, things like some cooking oils, dried fruit like honey, berries, or sorry, like other fruits that are maybe higher in calories, like granola as well. They're not necessarily bad food choices. They're not necessarily bad for your health, but that doesn't mean they're going to be filling. So those two aren't mutually exclusive, because there's a lot of foods that are like super high in calories, but also you could class them as healthy. But that's not going to help us be full and manage our hunger. So don't just think, right, I'm eating healthy, why am I not losing weight? Think, right, how much calories are you actually consuming from the food sources in your diet? And then that can make it a lot easier to stick to your diet as a result of that. And if you've not like done so, like a good I think something good for most individuals to do is spend some time tracking calories at one point or another, because it gives you the awareness of what foods are high in calories, what foods are low in calories. And that's the benefit of doing so, because like that knowledge and awareness of what foods are high in protein, low in protein, high in calories, low in calories, you can then carry on implementing those kind of positive habits and that kind of knowledge that you've gained when you move away from calorie tracking, and be able to kind of eyeball how much calories are in certain foods, be able to distinguish what foods may be more favourable to eat or less favourable to eat depending on what phase you're currently in. So yeah, I think there's definitely merit for most individuals doing that. And just like when you are buying foods from the shop, like have a wee glance at like the back of some like foods you're buying and think, right, how much does this actually fill me? And you can kind of compare certain foods you have. Like if, for example, if you have a meal deal for lunch and you look how much calories is in it, and you think, right, I've just inhaled X amount of calories and I'm not full, then you then know, right, that's probably best to stay away from when you're dieting. Whereas if you eat something low in calories and you're stuffed for hours, and you're like, right, that's probably a good food option and an option that's conducive towards my goals. And the next mistake I see people make is trying to fit tasty foods in their diet, trying to fit really kind of enjoyable and highly palatable foods in their diet. So things like chocolate, ice cream, pizza, burgers, things like that. And again, you can eat anything and lose weight as long as you are sticking to the laws of thermodynamics, or in other words, the laws of energy balance. Meaning, if you are consuming less calories than you're burning, you're going to lose weight. It's like a simple math equation in that regard, which will obviously be impacted by your activity too. So bear that in mind. But you can eat anything and lose weight, but that doesn't mean it's good to. Because see, if you're trying to fit things like Ben and Jerry's in your diet, you're trying to have a lot of chocolate, you're trying to have a lot of other tasty foods, and you're constantly eating out, yes, you can still lose weight, but you're just making it hard for yourself, because it's not going to contribute towards feelings of satiety. And also, sometimes, like, people keep it bland for a reason. When you see people dieting and they're not having absolutely delicious foods or meals that look absolutely amazing, it's because, like, see if you have, like, the most, like, what are you going to eat more of? Like, and overconsume. If you eat plain chicken breast, lettuce, and rice versus, let's say, a really nice, let's say, Indian dish, which is again chicken, rice, and then just like a sauce. It's going to be the Indian dish, whatever, you're going to consume more calories from that because it's more palatable. It's easier to eat a lot of. So sometimes keeping your food, I don't want to say like not enjoyable, but a bit more bland and boring can do you good, because you're probably not going to eat as much calories. And then when you are in the opposite, when you're trying to gain weight, for example, if you're ever in that position, if you're running a gaining phase and you want to do kind of the opposite and make your food as tasty and easy to eat as you possibly can, so that you can manage or you can keep your hunger high, and so that you're going to be able to kind of consume the amount of calories you want to consume. So yeah, when you're dieting, yes, you can have different foods here and there. You don't have to be crazy restrictive with your diet. You can go out for meals, but stop trying to fit in foods that are not going to contribute towards satiety and just be bad options, and make the diet harder than it needs to be when it comes to managing your hunger and appetite. Because if you, let's say 500 calories from, let's say, a big salad versus 500 calories from a McDonald's, what do you think is going to allow you to have less cravings, stick to your diet more effectively, and be fuller? It's probably going to be the salad, let's be honest. And again, it's a balancing act, because some people, they might have benefit from fitting in things like maybe some fast food here and there, some maybe poorer food choices, because again, they're enjoyable and you want to enjoy your diet. And some people might find if they completely remove them, then their diet's unsustainable. But at the same time, some people find if they put them in their diet, they're just going to want to eat more of those certain foods. So work out how you function, what helps you click when you're dieting, what helps you adhere best, and kind of run with that. But bear that in mind. So yes, make your food enjoyable, make your food taste nice, because you'll be able to adhere to it. But again, don't try and fit like mad desserts in your diet on a daily basis, or you'll just find yourself struggling and probably more focused on food as a byproduct of that. And also, the next mistake I see people make, especially when it comes to performance, is not centering their food around their training. So, when we think about it, when do we want the energy? When does our performance matter best? It's around the training window. So that's when we want to center our food, specifically our carbohydrates, because they're going to be our main source of energy, helping us perform well and also recover. So make sure you're placing your carbohydrates around your workout window, and also maybe some fat pre workout to slow the digestion of the carbohydrates you're consuming, because that's one of the roles of fats, just simply to slow down the digestion of your calories, as well as having like good benefits in terms of your hormonal health. So make sure that you are eating a good bit of your food around your session. For example, when my food's low during contest prep, for example, my diet will look like consuming a lot of calories pre-workout, post-workout, and then pre-bed as well to promote good sleep quality. But apart from that, my meals are kind of more so like protein and fruit, protein and vegetable based, because that's not where I want to, that's not when my performance matters. This might make managing your hunger a bit harder, but it's a balancing act because, for example, in my case, yes, I don't want to be hungry, but the judges don't care if I'm hungry. The judges care how I look on stage. And if me having, let's say, a more effective diet and upholding performance and recovery more effectively by eating around my session is going to allow me to do so, that's what I'm going to do. So it's a balancing act between what will allow you to adhere to your diet, but also what's going to allow you to perform your best. Because you can make the excuse, oh, it's more sustainable for anything, if that makes sense. Like training, for example. Yeah, I could train one times a week because that's going to be more sustainable. But how much results will that grant you in comparison to training 4 or 5 times a week? Because you get what you put in at the end of the day. And the next mistake I see people make is eating their calories super early in the day. So let's say you're working and you start at, let's say, 7 o'clock, and your calorie intake for the day is, let's say, 2,000. And let's say you get up and you absolutely slam a 1,000 calorie fry up before work. Then before 7 o'clock, you've got the whole day ahead of you and you've hit half your calorie intake. So what I'd say is, like, yes, we want to partition our calories around our session and recommend doing so, but also be mindful, like, if you aren't training first thing in the morning, there's no reason why you need to slam an absolutely massive breakfast, or you need to have quote unquote breakfast foods just because it's that time in the morning. Yes, there's benefit of spreading your protein out, having equal protein servings throughout the day, which I recommend doing if you want to maximize things, but at the same time, you don't need to have a bunch of calories from, let's say, carbs in the morning. Like, you don't need to slam a big bowl of cereal or, like I said, a fry up just because it's first thing in the morning. Like, save those calories for when you are training and also when you are more hungry, and then eat less when you are busy, when you're not that hungry, and when you don't really feel like eating. And the next mistake I see people make is, lastly, rushing their meals and not eating mindfully. This is something not a lot of people talk about. But see, if you're eating and you're not actually being present, you're sitting on your phone scrolling social media, you're watching something, you're preoccupied, you're not actually chewing your food a lot, then you're not gonna have as good hunger management. So the more we chew our food, the more satiety we get from it. So if we can chew our food more, take more bites of our food, it's not only going to lead to better digestion but better hunger management. And what I recommend doing is basically chew your food until it's like almost mush in your mouth, until you can't chew your food anymore. And also put your fork down in between bites. So what I'll do, especially when I'm dieting, but when I'm gaining as well to maintain good digestion, is I'll like have like a spoonful or fork of food or whatever, and then I'll put my fork down or my spoon down until like I've completely finished chewing that food and I've swallowed it and I've again chewed it excessively, and then I'll pick my fork or my spoon back up, because we've all been there when we've been absolutely starving and we've just wolfed a meal down, and we don't really get much satiety from it as a result of that, because we've not took our time, we've not actually been present when we're eating and kind of savoured the food, you could say. So bear that in mind when it comes to your nutrition. And like I said, that's going to lead to better digestion as well, which we obviously want to do, because that's going to be important for our ability to kind of absorb nutrients and also just maintain good digestion, especially if we're trying to eat a lot of food in the gaining phase. This is something that also is very important, because It's not about what we're consuming, it's what we're actually absorbing as well. So yeah, don't rush your meals, eat mindfully, put your fork down in between your bites, and then be present when you're eating, meaning don't scroll on your phone or a ton, or don't eat on the go. Actually make sure you're sitting down and you're actually focusing on eating that food that you're consuming. And in terms of, that's pretty much it, to be honest. That's all the points I wanted to cover. But yeah, hope it kind of helped. Any questions you have in regards to carrying out a dieting phase, or anything you want me to expand on or touch on in a future episode, please let me know. If you did enjoy the episode, like, subscribe, share it on your story. I massively appreciate everyone's support. And if you're listening to this or watching it, give it a share on Instagram, put it on your story, tag me, Charlie J. Cuthbert on Instagram, and tag at the Improvement Podcast, and I'll be sure to thank you for listening and give it a reshare on my story myself. Hope everyone has a great rest of your day, and thank you very much.